Pulsar Helium has received results from gas sample tests from its Jetstream #1 appraisal well in Minnesota, revealing helium contents of up to 13.8%. Announced on the 14th of March, the result comes from one of 11 samples specifically taken from a depth of 1,800 feet at the Topaz project. The samples were analysed by two laboratories, Isotech Laboratories and Smart Gas Sciences, and Dr. Peter Barry, a noble gas isotope geochemist that is advising the company, reviewed the data and said the value of 13.8% helium represents a minimum source estimate due to the clear presence of small amounts of atmospheric contamination in the samples. To find out what all of that means and why this is such a significant announcement, Gasworld is joined now by Thomas Abraham James, President and CEO of Pulsar Helium. Tom, thank you for joining us. Perhaps you could begin by telling us very briefly about Pulsar Helium and what your role is within the global helium business.
Thank you very much for having me, Rob. Pleasure to see you again. And yeah, look, Pulsar, we're a very young company. We listed on the TSXV in Canada only in August of last year, but we've been working behind the scenes for a period of time before that. But really what we've been doing is building up to this moment where we've just completed drilling the Jetstream #1 appraisal well in Minnesota, our flagship project. We also have a project in Greenland as well, primary helium there too. But really the reason that we exist is to make that big helium discovery and convert discovery into production and really try to help out with the current supply deficit for helium, which has persisted for a decade now. So we like to try and do our bit to remedy that.
And let's talk a bit about discovery, Tom. Tell us more about the Topaz project in particular. Where is it exactly? How long have you been working on this? And where do you think its potential sits in this bigger picture of global helium supply chains?
Yeah, the Topaz project in Minnesota, northern USA, and it was a discovery made by chance. We were introduced to it. So what happened in 2011, a long time ago now, a company was out there exploring for nickel, and when they were drilling down, they actually encountered gas, which for them was most unexpected. The gas was under great pressure, so much so that it blew the core barrel, so about a 3-meter long pipe filled with rock from about 540 meters depth up through the drill string out to surface and then sent it off like a projectile. And then that gas was roaring out of the hole. From people who were present at the time, they said it sounded like being at the back end of a jet engine. It was coming out so loud. So what they did was then they sampled the gas because their concern was, is it flammable? So they sent the gas to 2 different laboratories, found out it was non-flammable, but it had an extremely high helium content. So that was back in 2011. And then 2019 is when we got involved. And so a gentleman introduced us to the project. We looked at it, saw that it had all the requisite hallmarks for a big helium system. We knew that that particular part of North America, where the Great Lakes are, the mid-continent rift, has always been a very exciting place to go for helium, but it's just so big, where does one start? So when we were introduced to this and that 10.5% helium in that discovery hole, I mean, there was no going back. Extremely excited. We then built Pulsar. And then what we did was we gathered the data for the horse, you could say. So there'd been a drilled discovery, but none of the typical lead-up work that you'd have to data gathering that one would normally have. So we went out for a couple of years, and then we got the gravity data, the seismic data, magnetic data, build up the picture just to show, okay, what's happening at depth where the gas is, how big is this thing, and then tie up all the licenses as well. So to consolidate our position as the first mover there, and then all that culminated with the completion of the Jetstream #1 appraisal well, which was drilled only 20 meters from the discovery, and thank goodness it worked.
Fantastic, thanks, Tom. So it's been a story in the making for a number of years now, and really was bursting with potential by the sounds of it. That's fantastic, and that you did your due diligence first as well. That's important. So if it's a story in the making, let's talk about the big developments we've heard more recently. Let's talk more about this breakthrough you've announced with the Jetstream #1 appraisal well. We'll get on to the results in a moment, but for anyone that doesn't know what that is, can you tell us what an appraisal well is and why that matters?
Yeah, I mean, the first drill that goes out there, that's your exploratory drilling, so or your wildcatting. So for us, this is a new location. There's no history of helium production there or any other gas or oil for that matter. The original discovery, 2011, and then the appraisal well, which is the one that we just completed, is really confirming that original discovery to go in and to do additional testing down the hole as well. So not just the geochemistry, but then also downhole testing to find out the qualities of the reservoir, things like porosity and so on, and then to go in and do a pressure build-up and testing program as well, so we can maximize the amount of data that wasn't captured in that original discovery. And yeah, so really the objective was to replicate the discovery, go deeper, which we did, and to then get the additional data, which we're now in the process of doing.
Fantastic. Now, what we've learned this week is you've got lab results saying there are helium contents of up to 13.8% in that well, and it could be more, couldn't it? Because the atmospheric contamination in the samples could be effectively masking even higher helium content. Is that right? And tell us more, Tom.
Yeah, just the nature of helium is that it wants to leak, it wants to disappear from our atmosphere, and also there's no other sources where you could get helium contamination. So in our atmosphere, it's at very low levels. So when we received the results back, so these were captured from down the hole, and then they came up to surface, and then in the gathering system, and then put into to containers, canisters that were then sent to the laboratory for analysis. And each one of them, they had a certain degree of atmospheric contamination, so the air that we breathe. And that's to be anticipated just in the nature of how the sample comes up to the surface and before it gets into that canister. So what we found is that they certainly all contained highly elevated helium. But that one that we announced at 13.8%, that was actually the one which had the least amount of atmospheric contamination, is therefore the more believable out of all the results, whereas the other ones, the helium content has been quite heavily diluted. And then we've got a working relationship with Dr. Peter Barry. He's top of his game for gas geochemistry. We shared with him the results just to make sure and say, well, look, can you see that? Is there that atmospheric contamination? Which sample do you like the look of as being most representative? And that's the one we put forward in the announcement. So, but I mean, really for 13.8%, and yes, it looks like that might be slightly understated because of the obvious atmospheric contamination. But I mean, just in itself, 13.8% is just, I mean, it's just mind blowing. I mean, it's yeah. According to Edelgas, the highest grade that's ever been drilled on planet Earth. So, it's just such a good feeling to have worked on this for a number of years and then go off and do that drill and confirm it, and then get a higher result than the original discovery is brilliant. But to be honest, not that unexpected either, because that original well in 2011, they didn't have the proper sampling equipment. It's very difficult to obtain a sample, and one that didn't have a lot of atmospheric contamination. So we kind of had an inkling that perhaps it would be a bit higher, and it's very nice to have it confirmed.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is, Tom. Now, you use the word believable, and I forgive me for a moment, but I would just like to unpack that a little bit more. You and I are both aware of this. We often hear about strong helium concentrations in various wells and projects around the world. We hear about fantastically looking new projects that are springing up, shall we say. So let's unpack your believability more. Could you tell us more about the procedural side of the lab testing and the significance of these results? And essentially, look, this is validated and it is exciting.
Yeah, so we have we know that original discovery, the 10.5%, that went to two different laboratories. So, that was well verified. With the result that we announced from Jetstream, well, the first one that we received was from an instrument that we had on site. So we've got the thing called a mass spectrometer that was taking readings every 100 seconds. That one came back with 12.4% helium, and that's the original announcement that we made. And then what we did is we took off the line, so that the gas coming from up the hole through a series of tubes eventually makes its way to that mass spectrometer. But just beforehand, we were able to get a sample of that and put it into basically an impermeable gas canister. and then send that off to a laboratory. The laboratory obviously has got better conditions than we could ever have at a drill site, and so even digging down to the isotopic level, and then with two different labs. Once again, coming back with the same results there, it's super, pleasing, because it just so many layers of confirmation that high helium is, correct. And yeah, it's important because, quite frankly, I mean, it's so high that there could be a lot of people out there that just think that quite simply it's too good to be true. So we're very pleased that we've got plenty of data to back it up and support it.
Absolutely, and yeah, we do. The helium business does have a slight reputation for that, doesn't it, with overstated projections or projects? But that's really good to hear. This really is validated, corroborated, everything.
It is, and so really, it's just the beginning, though. We've got plenty of work to do now. So the big one that we know that everyone's waiting for is the pressure testing and the flow testing. So that's the next piece of data that we need to gather. So unfortunately, there's a slight delay with getting that, only because the state of Minnesota, the winter road conditions have finished. We now need to wait until the roads are reopened for heavy traffic. Should be a matter of weeks, but really it's out of our hands. But as soon as that's done, the gear will go in, collect that bit of data, and once again, we know that everyone's waiting for it, including ourselves. And once we have that, then we'll, it'd be nice to see, okay, so what is the flow? How much is there? We then give all that information across to Sproul, who are a resource estimator out of their Denver office in the US. And then about a month after that, Sproul should give us an updated resource calculation. And that for us is the real big one. We can't wait to see that. So really, there's a sequence of events that has to occur. And, we wait and see how it looks. But, step one is the helium there and isn't the high concentration. We can tick that box. So now we've got the next one there to find out, the pressure and flow, and then the resource.
Absolutely, and you mentioned Edelgas. We heard international gas advisor Cliff Kane, CEO of the Edelgas Group, describe these well results as an important milestone for Pulsar and the highest helium concentrations he's ever seen. So tell us, Tom, if we're going full circle here, ultimately, what could these results mean for the market, and why are they so important?
It's nice to see Cliff so excited. That means a lot. He's been in this industry for an awful long time, so his opinion, it means a lot. But what could it mean? I mean, high concentration, the point where we can produce, if that occurs, then just creates so many options. I mean, the overall amount of gas that needs to be processed or indeed discovered is less than, say, some of our peers, because the concentration is so high. So in terms of you're operating, less gas being processed, therefore efficiencies, cost reductions. If we start to see some fluctuations in the price of helium, having that potential for low cost production and high grade. That gives us, a little bit of wiggle room to be able to, potentially absorb those price changes, which, are inevitable for any commodity. So there's a lot of benefits there, and we're cautiously optimistic that we're onto something very good here. And the other thing is that we do think that there is quite big scale to this, with the lead up work on the seismic surveys, looking at other occurrences of gas in the vicinity. We know this is not just an isolated system. We know this is actually very large. It's got regional scale to it. So yeah, now we realize its potential.
And accepting its cautious optimism, and I guess you're bound to give the response I'm looking for here, but do you think this has the potential to be the next big thing in the helium business?
Look, I mean, I can say that it's a new location. It hasn't got a history of gas extraction to it, so I guess therefore you could say it's really got all the potential in the world and a wonderful head start by having that high concentration. A lot of other helium occurrences that are out there that have been looked at are in known and established gas fields. So I guess you could more or less know what the the ultimate volumes could be, what their outputs could be. And are they going to be big enough to really make a shift in the supply deficit that we have? Maybe, maybe not. But really, with Minnesota, I think that definitely it's got the good potential to be able to really, make a difference. Other places that are the same are, the places where people are looking for helium in a new environment. So, I'd include Tanzania in that as well, something which doesn't have a history of production, but it's got some wonderful helium concentrations there. And then, we've got that project in Greenland, very early stage, but once again, it hasn't got that history of production, therefore all the potential in the world. So look, long answer to your question, but look, I think that Minnesota's got a good chance of making a difference.
Fantastic. Well, you must be delighted. It affirms your belief in the well and the project. It must be a great day for investors too. So I guess what's next for you, Tom? You've given us the sequence of events, but what's next for you? Have you got a bottle of champagne on ice somewhere?
No, look, there's no time for celebrating, so there's too much work to be done, and that's not a problem because I thoroughly enjoy what I do for a living. But no, look, for us, it's now we're very happy for all of our investors, and so obviously there's been a nice uptick in the company's valuation, so I'm extremely happy for investors, and there's more of us out there because we are quite a young company. And raising the money for the IPO and getting this company moving, it's most of the people, ones that invested are people that we know. So I just like to say, a sincere thank you for your support, and it's nice to see that we can, make it all worthwhile. And for our, interested parties over in the USA. We're making movements there to make it easier for you to be able to invest in Pulsar. So we've got an application in with the OTC to facilitate Pulsar stock being quoted in the US. So hopefully we'll have news on that shortly as well. But really, yeah, back to work and make it happen as quickly as possible.
Well, a fantastic week for Pulsar and for new helium exploration. Thank you once again, Thomas Abraham James, President and CEO of Pulsar Helium.